Hi everyone. This is going to be part 2 of a video series talking about robotics and automation and how that's going to impact humankind over the next while. If you haven't watched part 1, please go back and watch that because I think this will make obviously more sense if you do so. In the last video I was talking about how robotics and automation are inevitable, how at some point all of human labor and even clerical work and that sort of thing will be handled by computers and automated robots, and the challenges that we are going to face when it comes to that. I also talked a little bit about the Venus Project and how they promote the idea of a future world that has a resource-based economy where all labor is done by computers and robotics, advanced AI, and a centralized computer bank would manage the Earth's resources, keep track of warehouses and delivery to people of the goods and services that they require, and that people will be freed from human labor in order that they can pursue their various interests. And hopefully the idea would be to elevate human consciousness to the next philosophical plane, one would hope. Now, the interesting thing to me about all of this is the ethics of it. Again, as in the last video I mentioned, I don't know how you can ethically tell a company, say a startup company, if I wanted to start up a company right now that makes salsa, how you could tell me that as a startup company, I can't start up with a fully automated company. I design the robotics myself, maybe I do a little software, something or other, or I hire someone, whatever it is, that I would not have the right to start up a company where I make salsa in my garage completely robotically. I don't know how you ethically tell me I don't have the right to do that, or that I even have to contribute taxes because I'm somehow displacing some workers when those jobs wouldn't have existed in the first place. You could extend that to pre-existing businesses that then automate, and they do actually take jobs that used to exist and they eliminate those jobs. I don't know how you ethically tell that company they don't have the right to automate those jobs, and so that's a discussion that we can have. Again, Mark Cuban had suggested that we tax companies that automate, that we have higher taxes. But even so, even if you do that, you're still never going to be able to fix the problem of the lost jobs, because you're not going to be able to tax a company to the effect that you can replace the income of that person, because you're going to remove the incentive for the company to then automate, right? They're not going to go to all the costs of automation and then have to pay the same amount in taxes as if they had to employ the number of people that the automation has replaced. That's not going to happen. And so keep that in mind as we talk a little bit about some of the social movements that are taking place, because what you've got right now is a lot of young people, particularly those who petition and riot at college campuses and other places, and not just young people, there are lots of older people as well, who rally against capitalism. And they are pro-socialism. Now, they can only be pro-socialism to the extent that they've ignored all of human history. Many of them will just say, well, they were doing it wrong. If we had the proper socialism, it would be done correctly. And they're anti-capitalist, but of course, they could only be anti-capitalist to the extent that they don't seem to understand that what we have today is not true free market capitalism. It's a kind of corporatism. It's a collusion between big business and government. We're going through this in my home province right now, where they're talking about undue influence of corporate lobbyists and things like that, right? So we don't have true free market capitalism. And all these people are petitioning for socialism. And as I think it was Maggie Thatcher that said at one point in time, socialism is great till you run out of other people's money. And that's an ethical issue that I have, that even if you did socialism right, it's still unethical, because you are saying to each according to their need and from each according to their ability. In other words, we deem ourselves to have an ethical right to the fruits of your labor. And I've had discussions with people about that, how that seems to me to equate slavery to some degree. And I've even discussed with people where I've said, okay, from each according to his ability, what if someone says, you know what, I don't feel like working because I don't want the fruits of my labor to all be taken from me? Can you force that person to work? I mean, from each according to his ability. It doesn't say from each according to his production. Interesting ethical dilemmas, I think, when it comes to socialism. But when I marry all of these ideas together with the impending tidal wave of robotics and automation that is inevitably headed our way, again, barring some catastrophic nuclear dawn, I come up with an interesting set of ideas. And they're not without ethical problems. I mean, there's a real shift here that's going to need to take place. And I don't know how you solve some of these problems, but I think it's something that we need desperately to be talking about right now. Because when it happens, it's going to be too late to avoid the human pain and suffering that's going to result from this massive paradigm shift that we're just now starting to enter, I think. So you've got people railing against capitalism and for socialism. Socialism itself, I believe, is unethical because of what I just mentioned. However, the only way I could see socialism working would be via a resource-based economy, to each according to their need, because they would not be taking the fruits of other people's labor by force, which naturally is how socialism has to work. Because if it's all voluntary, that's great, but as soon as someone says, I'd rather not give up, my entire garden full of carrots, then someone's got to come and take it by force. Because if they don't, of course, that sets a precedent. Other people are going to do the same, etc., etc. This is inevitably what happens in a socialist economy. And I use socialist economy with a grain of salt. So the only ethical way to have a socialist economy in that sense is if all of the labor is enacted by machines, that you're not taking from another human being. And that I find interesting, because I also recognize that the only way that you could achieve the ends of the resource-based economy, fully automated and computerized workforce, is through the profit motive of capitalism. Governments and even general, I think, human associations have not been as fruitful in developing these kind of technologies as companies with a profit motive, companies with a board of directors and shareholders. And let's not forget, all you people who rail against capitalism, the shareholders of many of these companies are the people who hold the pension funds that you depend on. Like, we can all be part of that structure. And it doesn't take that much money to get into like a little mutual fund or something like that has shares in some of these companies. But the shareholders and the board of directors are putting pressure on these companies to be lean and mean, and they're the ones who develop these different robotics and automations, and the people who are working on computer AI to a large degree, to the extent that it's going to be efficient enough that it would be profitable. The profit motive is a purifying process when it comes to these sorts of things, because people's fortunes are going to be made or lost, people's careers are going to be made or lost based on the success or failure of these different projects. And so it's interesting to me to think that the very people who are railing against capitalism really would depend on capitalism, if they knew what they were talking about, to develop the kind of socialist utopia that they dream of, where everyone would have their financial needs met. Because really, financial needs are just a middleman. What we're talking about is the needs for goods and services, and healthcare and food and housing and shelter and these sorts of things. And this presents another ethical dilemma, is how do you make the transition from our current economic model to a future sort of resource-based economy, Venus Project type model? Because at some point you would have to, I think, petition the big corporate owners. I think you would have to appeal to them that for the good of mankind, once we reach that level, that they turn over the fruits of their endeavors to the whole of mankind, that we somehow transition peacefully and ethically into a resource-based economy. Because I don't think that you can demand and take by force the fruits of their efforts and labor through the period of time that we built up to that full automation model. I don't think you can do that in an ethical way. It's unethical. And I think whatever we do ought to be ethical. I mean, I don't think we can pat ourselves on the back for having achieved some utopian end if we had to shed a lot of blood through the taking by force of all the hard work and ingenuity of profit-motivated capitalist, free market companies to get there. I don't think that that's a good way to end that story. So I'd like to know what you all think about what I've had to say in this couple of videos. Regardless of how right or how wrong I am, I mean, these are the miscellaneous ramblings of a rural auto mechanic thinking about these things deep at night in the hot tub and having conversations with a few people around here that have given me a lot of food for thought when it comes to these things. But I do think that the robotics and automation revolution is inevitable. It's coming. It's actually here already. I bought a drone a few years ago, and I'm amazed at how outdated it is. It's a couple of years ago now. I'm amazed at how outdated it already is. And of course, it's outdated in all these things like the ability for it to transmit the signal back to the handheld base thing, for your viewing picture. It's got a high definition camera on it. I'm amazed at how out of date it already is in object avoidance and autonomous flight. Even when I bought it a couple of years ago, you could program a flight on an iPad. Say I want it to go here, 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 and here, and at each point I want it to stop, and I want it to stop at this elevation at this location, a lower elevation at the next, a higher at the next. I want it to aim at this many degrees in this location, this many degrees in that location, hover for 20 seconds in this location, 5 seconds in this, etc., etc. You set up this flight path, press the button on the iPad on this touch screen, and the thing goes up and it does it all. So if you wanted to say take a picture series, aerial photographs of your property, you could set it all up ahead of time. You've got your little camera on there, set it up to take a picture every 5 seconds or whatever, and let the thing do its completely autonomous flight and bring it back, and you've got your picture set. And now the autonomous flight is so much more. You can have the thing follow you. It recognizes you, and it will just follow you at a perfect pace to yours, and it will avoid objects along the way, telephone pole, tree, whatever. I'm amazed at how out of date it already is. It's been 2 years, and this is just a consumer toy compared to some of the things that they're developing. So I think we would be fooling ourselves not to be having this discussion right now. And too many of us, I think, are either hopefully ignoring it or blissfully unaware or whatever, like say Bill O'Reilly was when talking with Mark Cuban. But I don't think we can afford that, because this is a major crisis and a potential major crisis looming. And it's going to be here pretty soon. You're going to start to see some of the pain in larger centers where all of these automated vehicles are going to start replacing otherwise gainfully employed people. And that's going to put pressure on other areas, because, of course, these people are going to have to move or retrain or something like that. It's going to put pressure in other areas. And at the same time, the robotics and automation and computer AI is marching forward to take even more and more jobs. And there's going to be more clerical jobs lost and that sort of thing. So I think this is a discussion that we need to be having right now. And I think it actually needs to displace all of this nonsensical talk about all these very, very superficial and even often non-existent social issues that we have, because it's going to happen one way or another. We're either going to shift our focus from a lot of those issues to this coming major human paradigm shift, or we're going to be forced to. We're going to go back to desperately trying just to survive. And suddenly microaggressions will become a lost terminology. Let me know, as always, what you think. Thanks for watching.